Welcome to another episode of Jackson District Library's book tasting. Today we are coming to you from the beautiful new Hanover Branch, which was purchased and renovated in 2024. The Hanover staff and community just celebrated their grand opening. If this is your first time with book tasting, here's a bit about the program. The book tasting team invites a member of the Jackson District Library team to chat with us about some of the books they've loved recently. We each take turns giving a quick taste of just a few books that we think were interesting, fascinating, touching, or just plain fun. We chat a little bit about these titles, and then we talk about what we're looking forward to read next. Hi, I'm Christina from the Springport and Parma branches.
I'm Carly from the Eastern Branch, and today our guest is Jill, who is from the Hanover Branch. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Jill.
Hi, my name is Jill. I've been working at the Hanover Branch for 11 years now.
Wow, snaps for Jill.
I'm an oldster. I don't always finish books very often, only if they're super good, because I don't want to waste my life reading books I don't like. So that's a little fun fact about me.
I love that. And that's really good advice, too, for our watchers and for the readers at Jackson District Library, because there's a big list of books to read and not nearly enough time to read them all.
So I'm going to start off and share some of my favorite books that I've been recently reading. The first one is a brand new book. It's called The Way of Play, Using Little Moments of Big Connection to Raise Calm, Confident Kids, and it's written by two doctors, Payne, Bryson, and Georgie, Wisen-Vincent. I am a naturally playful person, so I wanted to figure out how to use play to help build my relationship more with my kids, my personal kids, or the kids that I interact with here at the library. You do not have to be a naturally playful person in order to gain tips from this book. In fact, it was really written for those who are not naturally playful. There are 7 skills that they introduce. One of the ones that was most touching for me was that we are a mirror. On the one hand, you are a mirror, so whenever your child or whatever child you're playing with has a certain look on their face, you can mirror that look back to them so they know that somebody's paying attention and is noticing what's going on with me. But what was touching for me personally is that I am a mirror to my kids. And so if I am having a frustrating moment, they're going to do that too. If I want my kids to be more calm and patient when they're tackling things, that I need to be modeling that for them. And so those moments whenever I feel the frustration, I need to kind of make it into a game. Like when they're learning to tie their shoes and they're getting super frustrated, I need to learn how to make that into a playful moment instead of a extremely intense moment. I highly recommend this book. They have a nice little part in the back where you can make a copy of it to help you remember all of their tips just to help. So I'm using this in my own life. So the next book I wanted to talk about, I actually had seen the movie first years ago. It's The Martian. So the movie is with Matt Damon, but I didn't read the book until a little while ago. The book's written by Andy Weir. I listened to it as an audiobook. So as I mentioned in our last book tasting, I have a long commute, and the way to help that commute is to listen to good audiobooks. So at the time, because I enjoyed the movie, I thought, well, I'll give the book a try. I wasn't really sure how I was gonna like it, but I loved it. It was so amazing. I loved the book. I love the movie, but the book is so much better. Mark Watney, who's the main character in the book, comes off so much more in depth. All of the minor characters come more in depth. I just wanted so much for Mark to survive. So Mark's a botanist that got to go to Mars with 5 other astronauts, but then he ended up getting left behind because there was a dust storm and he got hurt. So he wakes up to being on Mars with nobody but just all of their equipment. And he knows people are going to eventually come back to get him from Mars, but it's going to be a very long time. So he has to figure out how to survive. And then eventually there's a way that he's able to connect with Earth. Very suspenseful things happen. I love the book so much that I made sure to milk the audiobook. I prevented myself from binging it because it was so good.
Oh my gosh.
So I highly recommend this, especially if you're not a sci-fi person. This is still sci-fi, but it's a realistic sci-fi fiction, I guess. And then this is a book that I'm going to be reading pretty soon. It's called My Black Country, and it's by a country music writer, Alice Randall, who is Black. So I grew up in Texas, if you don't know that. Kind of synonymous with Texas is country. I grew up and I love country music, but I also loved alternative rock. So this is back in the 90s, and one of my favorite bands was Hootie and the Blowfish. Mm-hmm. Now, this was before the internet, and again, I'm like a preteen. I don't know the names of any of the people in the band. I just know their voices. So I really listened to Hootie, skip a few decades, and I'm listening to country music on the radio. And all of a sudden, I hear Wagon Wheel. And I'm like, oh, this is a great song. Like, this guy's voice is really good. He sounds really familiar. And so I go, because this is the era of the internet, right? I go and I find out it's Darius Rucker. And I'm like, oh, who's that? And it's, oh, he was the singer of Hootie and the Blowfish. The most stunning thing for me was not because there's a Black man that's singing country music. It was that he did rock music and then now he's doing country music. Like, for me, that was very like, but I loved it so much. So let's fast forward another few more decades, and Beyonce comes out with a country album. And everybody's up in arms about this very successful Black woman who's now doing country music. And how dare her? It was very surprising for me because growing up in Texas, I knew lots of Black people who were cowboys and liked country music. So why is this such a big thing? Well, I'm looking forward to reading about her. She's has a vast history of writing country music, and she also goes through the history of quite a few Black people previously in country music and currently, and it continues, and I'm really looking forward to reading about the history.
That's amazing. And it's one of those things where it's like a niche history technically. Like, I think that's the kind of nonfiction book where it focuses and zooms in really deeply. But it's one of those things that, like, why haven't we heard more about this before now, you know?
Yes, exactly. And it reminded me, because I read a lot of books about Misty Copeland, who is a Black ballerina, and how she discovered another Black ballerina before her in the 50s and the 60s named Raven Wilkinson, how she would go down south in the segregated South with these traveling ballet companies and perform. And Misty was so surprised that she had no idea who this was, and what a travesty that was that history was not exposed. So she did her best to show the world Raven. And another point with Misty Copeland, people would talk to her because of her figure and also being Black that maybe she should be dancing jazz or like hip hop or funk, not fitting that stereotype, and how she pushed back on that because no, she loved ballet. And why can't she be a Black ballerina? So now she's a really good role model.
That's fascinating. I'd love to hear what you think when you finished it.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Christina. And now we're going to have Jill with your picks.
So my favorite genre is the psychological thriller, but I've been trying to branch out a little bit. So the first book I'm going to talk about is Nobody But Us by Laure van Rensburg. This was my favorite in 2022, and I made all of our patrons read it. Oh. It's about a professor and his student who are at a secluded cabin for, a little romance. They're both really sketchy. And all I'm going to say is somebody gets killed, and the person who does it gets away with it. And I was so impressed because the killer covered all their bases. So I'm keeping that info in the back of my head just in case I need to use that. But and I think this was her debut book. And I haven't read anything else by her. There's been like a novella or two, but I don't want to, wreck it. So I'm just going to go with this one. My next book, we read this for book club, Devil in the White City by Erik Larson. It's nonfiction. The ladies get mad at me because I don't finish all the books because sometimes they're terrible. But I did finish this one, and the first part is so boring because they're telling you all the names of all the architects. So this is about the World's Fair in Chicago, 1893, and everything they had to do to get ready for it. And they built 200 buildings in less than 2 years. That's why they call it the White City, because they didn't have time to use bricks and stones. So they basically put these shacks up and sprayed them with, plaster or whatever. They were trying to compete with Paris, who had just had the previous fair. I wasn't gonna finish it. And then actually our friend's president, who loves this book, she's like, oh, they're just trying to show you the massiveness of everything they had to do. So I slogged on, and from part 2 on, it was much better. There's a serial killer in Chicago.
Of course.
And this guy, he got away with a lot. And I understand it was the 1800s, but this guy built a crematorium in his basement, and nobody questioned it.
Oh my gosh.
And all these people
Nobody
would go.
questioned it?
Nobody questioned. He had a guy come in to make it so it burned at a higher temperature.
That's sketchy.
This is so sketchy. And then all these people would disappear who weren't convenient for him to have around anymore. And be like, oh, she's visiting relatives in Indiana. And I was hoping that the killer and the whole World's Fair thing would come together. The killer would get one of the architect's daughters or something. That didn't happen. So I'm not really quite sure why the serial killer guy was in there. But it was very interesting. I learned some things about the Ferris wheel. It was invented there, so
Really?
I just spoiled that for you. But it wasn't like the Ferris wheels we know. They had these huge cars there were 1,200 people at a time on that Ferris wheel, and no one understood how the thing stayed standing up. They dug canals and lagoons, and it was quite the operation in the 1800s. I'm glad I finished it. I almost didn't because I kept falling asleep.
Nowadays, do they still have evidence of all of this?
I want to say the Arts and Crafts building is the only one that's left, but
Okay.
I don't think the lagoons.
Oh, really? Huh.
But they had a landscape architect. They wanted electric boats because they didn't want it to be loud, but they wanted to be able to take people around the lagoons and things like that.
And so this is all nonfiction. It's all true story,
is
like
all
a
true
real
story.
serial killer.
Supposedly, yeah. And I looked the serial killer up. They think he could have killed up to 200 people. But the problem was, so with the fair in town, they had a lot of people coming to work, a lot of young women. He opened a hotel for people to stay in the World Fair. Yeah, in the building where his crematorium was. So
Don't go in there.
Yes. And one last weird thing about this is the medical schools really wanted skeletons, and they were hard to get. Some of the medical schools were robbing graves to get skeletons. Well, this guy was killing people, reattaching their skeletons all to clearing off the bones and selling the skeletons to people.
Oh my gosh.
And he was never
The
found?
cottage industry. Oh, he was found, yeah.
Okay.
And there were newspaper articles about his weird hotel. There would be doors going to nowhere. For a book that I couldn't stand, I have a lot to say.
Yeah.
That was good. I would read it. I would start at part 2. My next book is Kristin Hannah, The Great Alone. I'm not a big Kristin Hannah fan. Okay, I'm trying to widen my horizons. 10 years ago, we read a Kristin Hannah book for book club. It was about this lady who had this abusive husband, and she kept going back to him. And I'm like, I'm not reading this because I can't stand, I just couldn't take it. Well, come to find out, that's what the book club ladies told me. So that was the last time I read it. I know. But this one spoke to me because this is about a family from California, and it happened in the early 70s. The dad was a Vietnam vet with PTSD. And so he was kind of running from his problems. They would move quite often. They moved to the middle of nowhere, Alaska, in this town where, people had to fend for themselves. Part of it dealt with the father's mental illness, dealing with his family. I like how Kristin Hannah writes as far as the relationships. It spoke to me because when I was a kid, we moved from Oregon to northern Michigan. But it was really good. I liked how she developed the characters and their relationships with each other. I liked how she ended it. And that is, I have a problem with some authors, how they end their books. John Grisham. Because
Not to name any names.
Not to name any names, and you'll probably get 3 emails about that. But she really, pulled everything together. Yes, so I appreciated that about her. I may or may not read another one. Everybody's like, oh, Kristin Hannah makes you cry. But I didn't cry.
I read Four Winds by her, and so I didn't really care for it too much. But then I listened to The Woman. That one changed my mind.
Yeah.
So now I'm interested to read this one.
Somebody said that this one and Winter Garden are 2 a little bit different ones if you don't like I call it foo-foo. I'm sure there's a real word for that. This is my most recent book. It's called Here One Moment by Liane Moriarty. I'm hit and miss with her sometimes, I enjoyed this book because I liked the idea. It was very creative. This woman walks down an aisle on a plane and starts pointing at people and giving them an age and cause of death. Liver disease, 47, drowning. The woman doesn't remember anything. She's kind of in a trance. It kind of follows the people to see if their fortunes come true. The thing I loved about this book was the ending. The ending was great. I did finish this one. And I just liked the idea. It was very creative, telling people's fortunes and then going through the years, what happened to some people, what didn't happen to some people.
If fate is real.
See if the fortunes came true. I really love the ending. I'm all about the endings.
That's amazing when a really great ending can elevate a book from just like, that was
Exactly.
fine, to like, that was so cool.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm struggling with the endings lately. Or the authors are, not me.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
All right, so I wasn't crying over The Martian, but I thought I was gonna like start coughing. I'm like, oh my god.
Oh, yeah.
Like I'm so touched by Andy Weir.
The first book that I want to talk about is Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. This book is about a woman named Mia and her daughter Pearl who move into a home in the suburbs. The home is owned by the Richardson family, and so Mia is renting it. Before long, all 4 of the Richardson kids are involved with Mia and Pearl in some way, either through friendship or a crush or hanging out with Mia, who is an artist. Eventually, the town kind of erupts over this scandal where this other family wants to adopt this Chinese American baby. The mother of the baby still wants the baby, but she gave her up. And so it's this interesting look at race and class in one suburban neighborhood and kind of all of the fallout that happens. The characters are all kind of equally dislikable. Like, I like them all because they seem really relatable and relevant, right? Like, I feel like I know a person for each character. Like, they're really realistic in their characterizations, and they do good things. Like, there's things about each character to like, but there's also things about each character that's not really that likable. It was a really interesting write-up on how these dividing lines show up in everyday kind of life. The title really comes to a wrap and to a close at the very end of the book. And I also like how it's kind of framed. So it starts with the end, and then you have to go through and read through everything to get to the end and see how it came about. So that was really interesting. I really enjoyed it. I read it for the Read Harder challenge. Wasn't sure I was gonna like it because I don't normally read like dramas, but I liked it a lot more than I thought it would. The next book is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I've had a couple of hits and misses with Taylor Jenkins Reid, but I loved this book. It's actually written like a transcript of like a documentary. So it's about this fictional band called The Six that formed in the late 60s, early 70s. And then Daisy Jones is like a hot new vocalist, and she ends up doing a duet with the band or with one of the members of the band. And so the band like signs her on. So it becomes Daisy Jones and the Six. People are talking to this person who's documenting this. And so it's all written from the present of these people looking back on their time in a rock band in the 70s. Thought I had the ending pegged, and I didn't. The ending was a really lovely, gentle surprise. I was expecting it to go in this real left turn, and it didn't in the way that I expected it to, and I loved that about it, actually. So it kind of tricks you. You think you know what's going to happen, and you don't. Very, very good. I enjoyed that. This next one is a sci-fi fantasy. It's called All the Birds in the Sky by Charlie Jane Anders. This is almost a magical realism. It has kind of that feel, almost a Terry Pratchett kind of a feel to it. Patricia finds out as a child that she's a witch, and she finds that out because she talks to a bird. And then Lawrence is kind of a super genius. His first big thing that he ever does is he creates a watch that's actually a time machine, and it takes you back 2 seconds. They're both loners in school, and they both suffer from bullying in middle school, so they become friends. And then as they grow and become adults, it turns out that they're on separate sides of this war. Lawrence becomes one of the head guys in like this tech, computer-based like technology that needs to save the world. And Patricia becomes part of this group of witches that are also trying to save the world, but they think tech is evil. Like tech is gonna be the reason that the world ends. They have to figure out how to stay friends. I thought it was really well written, really well paced, really kind of cheeky, campy. The magic is interesting. The tech is hilarious. Definitely worth a read. I thought this was a really good book. The last book that I wanted to talk about today is a nonfiction called The Cold Vanish, Seeking the Missing in North America's Wildlands by John Billman. This one was really interesting because John Billman is an investigative journalist, and he's specifically interested in missing missing person cases, and he often participates in searches for missing people. So he's involved in like going out into the woods and doing sweeps, and specifically on national forest land. So not necessarily national parks, but national forests.
Okay.
Because one of the things he talks about is who claims ownership of those missing persons cases. Is it federal? Is it state? What if that land is right next to private land? Like, who is in charge? He actually lives in northern Michigan, and he has participated in multiple searches in northern Michigan, but also into Canada and all over the US to help with these searches. So this book is framed with his involvement with the search for Jacob Gray, who went missing in Washington and Oregon, like that area. John actually becomes friends with this missing person's father, Randy, for years. They're searching for this missing young man. He was in his 20s. He was riding his bicycle, and he's just gone. And like his bike was found, but he's just gone. So he talks about what it is like to be a family member where you're not getting help from the local, state, or federal governments. How do you maintain a search? You know, and there's millions of acres of these forested, uninhabited spaces. If there's a sheriff town over, that sheriff might be involved, but probably not because it's technically outside of their jurisdiction. And how do you coordinate all of that? I just thought it was so interesting. And not a lot of people know about that or think about that. He talks about several cases through the book to highlight different aspects of what a search is like, but it's all kind of framed and brought back to this ongoing search for Jacob Gray. It's not, I guess, a super spoiler, maybe spoilers. They end up finding Jacob Gray's body. And that's how they end it. He talks about what it's like to retrieve somebody who has been found. It's really touching. At one point when I was reading it, I was about halfway through and I'm like, okay, this is getting kind of repetitive and it's getting kind of boring. I can't remember the exact line that he said, but he kind of acknowledged that in his writing. And he's like, that's what it's like to do a search. It's repetitive, monotony. We searched this particular area 6 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago, but now we're going to search it again with different technology, different dogs. That repetition is actually part of the emotional impact of being a part of a search for a missing person. I thought it was really interesting, really fascinating, kind of sad, very hopeful. If you're a hiker or a camper, you should probably read this. But also if you're interested in long form nonfiction journalism, highly recommend.
I will definitely read that.
Yeah.
These were all books that we've read fairly recently and that we really enjoyed. So before we end for today, let's talk about some of the things that we're looking forward to. Now, Christina, I know you talked about My Black Country, which sounds really, really interesting, but I actually have a recommendation for you too, based off of your stack here. I read Andy Weir's Project Hail Mary, and I read that as a physical book. I can't say anything without giving extreme spoilers, but I've heard that it is one of the most impactful audiobooks, and that most people prefer the audiobook to the physical book, even people who read the physical books, because the audiobook has this specific thing.
My friend and I do a book club, and we're definitely going to be reading this because the movie is going to be coming out. So I definitely will be listening to the audiobook.
Did you have anything else that you were looking forward to?
Currently, I'm reading Digging into Nature, which is a book about how to help your children incorporate nature into their lives and also how healthy it is to be out in nature. It doesn't matter what kind of area, if you live urban, suburban, there's still ways that you can try to work nature into your everyday life. So I'm reading that, and I'm also listening to James, which is talking from the perspective of Jem from Adventure of Huckleberry Finn, which is so good. I am loving it. I'm listening to the audio version of it. I'm doing the Read Harder challenge, and I found a romance cover that didn't have a person on it. But I can't remember the name of it right now, but yeah.
I'd love to hear what you think.
Yeah. Probably very spicy.
Oh, I bet. 5 peppers.
We just talked about that on the podcast. Talked about the spicy pepper rating system.
No shame. No shame.
How about you, Jill?
I am finishing up a book called Tell Me What You Did by Carter Wilson, about a person who has a podcast and people call in and admit to crimes. I enjoyed it. Like, I wanted to know what was happening. My latest one, I just got this off the hold shelf, is Long Bright River. I don't remember why I wanted to read it because I've been on hold for it for like 6 months.
Yeah. Wow.
But it's also a
be
series,
good.
right? It must be good.
I love a good mystery book. Like, why did I put this on hold?
Yeah, that is a mystery. And if it's not good by the 3rd chapter, I'm not finishing it.
Well, we want to hear about it either way. So I have 2 coming up real quick that I'm very excited to read. Midnight at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lowe. This is a sapphic kind of mystery that takes place in Chinatown in San Francisco in the 50s. So it's Red Scare, it's McCarthyism, and it's a young woman who's trying to navigate all of this stuff while just being a young person in a big city. So that sounds really exciting. And I know that Rachel, the assistant director here at JDL, read it and absolutely loved it. She adored it. So it comes very highly recommended. Another one that I want to read for music fans out there is the memoir that was released last year by Geddy Lee, the lead singer of the band Rush. They're a lot of fun. I grew up listening to them. And so his memoir is called My Effin' Life. And it's spelled like that too, like EFFIN', which I love. I love that title. I'm really excited to read about him and his experiences. And then I did bring this. I'm reading this now. I talked about it at the last book tasting. So this is Water Moon by Samantha Soto Yambao. If you watched the last book tasting, then you were there for like the jump scare part where I was scrolling my phone to find all the last names.
It got returned.
I thought this was going to be more of a magical realism book, but it turns out that it's all fantasy all the time. I am so sucked into it. I just started it a couple days ago. I'm already halfway through.
Nice.
I cannot put it down. It is so good. So I'll keep you all posted. Thank you so much, Jill, for joining us today and chatting with us about some amazing books. And a really big thank you too to the Hanover Branch for letting us stay and impose on your space a little bit. It's so beautiful here. We really want all of our patrons to come check it out. Thank you, Dan, behind the camera. Without you, we could not make book tasting at all. So thank you so much. This has been another episode of Book Tasting. We hope you found a couple of titles that you can add to your holds list or your TBR. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.
That was fast. Went on.
Well, we're done here.
Let's take you down.
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, I was doing that. There's not enough coffee here for you to be keeping up with that.
That was so fast.
Why is it even at that setting?
It just defaults to 100%.
Who could?
Yeah, who reads it like that?
Who would use it at that speed?